up a table, right, to figure out where I'm going to be in position relative to this topic. So to make it or bring it more to earth, if you will, no puns intended, we will finish the lyrics to exhibit how we do this as people, right? So, ain't no mountain high.
Enough.
How would you finish that sentence?
Ain't no mountain high enough.
Ain't no valley low enough.
There's a lot of answers, right?
Uh-huh.
Ain't no mountain high, ain't no valley low, right? And then there's also ain't no mountain high enough. That's a valid answer as well, and this actually leads to my point. What about lean on me?
When you're not strong.
Yeah, we're all really sure about that one.
Yeah.
So this is what AI is actually doing, and it's important to remember that there are multiple answers to questions. If I said that in a room of Spanish-speaking individuals, I might have trouble getting an answer, if you will, right? And so it's actually guessing what the next words are very fast using these models, right? So you can picture, we've given it the input of ain't no mountain high, and then we get to ain't no valley low, because it's the most probable outcome for what comes after you say ain't no mountain high, right? So that's what it's doing, right? That's what generative AI is. In essence, it is guessing. And that's kind of an important piece. And this slide, I know it's hard to see, is actually just showing GPT doing the same exercise, right? Now, there's another, this one's just for fun. If you say FRE, what comes after that? Right, so some people would say it's a Glorilla lyric.
Oh, okay. You got me with that.
Some people would say that it has something to do with a free credit report.
Okay.
Right? And so there are multiple answers, like we said earlier, for how we can solve for this, and particularly for people who are in Memphis, Glorilla might come to mind, but particularly for those who participate in or were watching TV in the late or early 2000s. Freecreditreport.com would come to mind, right? And so with that being said, there are some great restrictions to what generative AI can do today. Some of those have actually been removed. We'll talk about that a little bit. But there's a disclaimer on the site that talks about how there are specific things that it can't do. It will also warn you, don't take it as a source for information. You should check important or sensitive information against a known reputable source, perhaps an encyclopedia. Maybe encyclopedia has become popular again. I don't know. But it does raise a lot of questions about society. Where do we go from here? A lot of people are scared of AI. Are you all optimists? Would you call yourselves optimists?
Yes.
Yep.
Not pessimistic.
Optimists. That's great. We got a room full of optimists. Can any optimist explain to me what a utopia is? Yeah, that's a great way. Utopia typically describes an imaginary community or society that possesses highly desirable or nearly perfect qualities for its members, right? Sometimes we like to think of perhaps the metaverse being this place, but why not have it here on Earth, right? But with that being said, we might have a picture of this fantastical world of land and beauty, maybe a Garden of Eden, if you will. Well, I would like to introduce a new concept for some of you. It's the idea of a protopia. Right? So protopia is the idea that we will constantly be in a state of becoming something new. And it will require optimists ultimately to get to a point where we truly believe that becoming, what we are becoming, is a good thing. Right. So a lot of things will be shaken. In fact, if you look at that high cycle, there's a trough of disillusionment that every piece of technology goes through where it promises great things, that's kind of the peak, and then we realize that it can't do some things that we hope for it to do, and then ultimately it kind of levels out to a place where it's truly providing productive value at scale, if you will. And so that kind of gets to my first point. AI is a platform for innovation, right? It is a new place for us to get started with kind of some people are calling it the fourth industrial revolution, if you will, right? And the idea, it's not just my idea that this is like super important, right? I don't know if anyone has seen this news line this week, but OpenAI is actually poaching people from Google at this point, offering $10 million pay packages. Wow. Right? And so this is on a per year basis, right? And so to give perspective, there's something that's really about to happen, right? It's kind of a new space to be in. If I was an expert, I promise I'd not be here. But ultimately, there's kind of this idea that there are things that are coming that are going to be inevitable, if you will, right? So what's inevitable about the AI movement, if you will? Does anyone know what this is?
It's a shot.
I gave this talk before, so I'm looking at you guys.
I'm stumped.
So this is Kevin Kelly. Kevin Kelly is the former editor of Wired magazine, and he is a go-to resource for all things future, if you will. He wrote a book. It goes over 12 key principles of what's inevitable. This idea of becoming, I've already discussed with you. There's another idea of cognifying, right? And I encourage you to actually pick up the book to go and check out some more of the really cool things that they've added here. But ultimately, the idea is that we go from, thing to adding electricity, it becomes smart, right? And then we get to a place where we can add the internet, and so that internet plus thing plus AI ultimately creates a cognified object, right? So in here, you can see we go from IPS, we add now that fridge is connected to the internet and it's smart, maybe you can see some information about the fact that you have left the refrigerator door open and it's giving you notifications of that, right? And then we get to a cognified refrigerator that is now telling you, hey, you're at the grocery store, you probably should get some new eggs or some new milk because it's expired, right? This idea, this road to cognification. Another idea that we should also think about is how do we add enhancements to ourselves, right? And I kind of want to drive this message home to the students in the room as well as the professionals, right? The idea is that we can no longer be great in and of ourselves, but the idea is that we've joined hands with machines to get to a point of greater cognification. Why is this important? So there's a Financial Times article. I think the study was done by, I want to say McKinsey, if I'm not. No, it was with Boston Consulting Group. And what they did, they had one group of less skilled workers, they had another group of skilled workers, and then they gave everyone access to ChatGPT. And I'm not going to ask you to read the graph, but ultimately what was discovered is that less skilled workers became just as good as highly skilled workers over the course of time, right? And so ultimately, even with the best tools in hand, high skilled workers are on the same playing field as low skilled workers over time. You understand that? So how does that translate? That means that regular people can, leave a degree, leave without a degree, college, and then ultimately be able to compete with highly skilled people, regardless of what the origins might have been, At the end of the day, the peak level of productivity is reached once we have these tools in hand. This was a big deal, right? And I know we're talking about it from like a consulting standpoint with the Boston Consulting Group, but it was enough to also kind of stop productivity in Hollywood, if I'm not mistaken, right? And if you are unclear on that, there's been that big actors strike. All of that was related to AI, or a lot of it was related to AI, and you can feel the effects of that if you just ask yourself, what's in the movies right now? No one knows. Right? I tried to go like 2 weeks ago. It was like, oh, I'll catch a movie, and there's literally like nothing in the movie theater. Luckily, they reached an agreement, and we'll have a nice conversation about governance later today. But with that being said, the idea that they kind of landed at was that ultimately actors have to get paid more, and streaming services are going to have to pay royalties to these large motion picture groups or production companies, and then that has to be split amongst the actors appropriately, and then if their image and likeness is used in a particular fashion, blah, 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 right? Which is cool for now, but I'm expecting that this AI stuff moves so fast that this will almost not matter probably like 5 years from now. But with that being said, what can we build? Did anyone catch the OpenAI FA highlights? Anybody know about that?
I didn't catch it. Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, so there's been progress on GPT, right? And I was actually discussing this with one of my colleagues at work earlier today about how fast we're moving, right? Like ultimately, one of the highest forms of using GPT right now is this idea that we get a personalized assistant that can talk to us, right? And when you think about, I remember when I joined Microsoft in 2016 or 2017, Cortana was really kept picking up, right? Cortana, what was the other? I guess the Siri was a really popular thing, right? And when you think about the scale of a company that was required to ultimately produce a voice assistant, it was quite large, right? Like only Apple, only Google, only Microsoft could produce a technology of that caliber, right? Where we are today is that in 30 minutes yesterday, I created a HR advisor for my company using my company handbook that my colleagues or my employees can actually go to and get advice from if needed, right? 30 minutes, right? One of the biggest updates that came from the OpenAI Dev Day highlights was that text-to-speech got so much easier. And then the other big piece is that context grew. So now I can understand and properly navigate up to 300 pages of content as opposed to, it was about 16 times smaller just 3 weeks ago. Other fun stuff, there's GPT for Enterprise. So for those of you who are scared of using this at work, you can encourage your invest in GPT for Enterprise. That'll keep all of your data siloed just to your enterprise. The model on your own data set. Microsoft has some really cool tech coming for that as well. There's this assistance API, which is the idea that you can actually just add an assistant to your existing code, right? Where it will kind of understand what the customer is working through, and then ultimately, based on inputs from that customer, it might actually write net new code or functions, or call functions that are available in your code base to solve a customer's problem live, right? And I know that's super techy. The copyright shield is also super interesting. And so OpenAI is ultimately saying to its customers, if you start using content that was produced by someone else and that company comes after you, we will protect you, right? So these are big bets being made, right? there's a lot of work going into what could be net new, right? And this is to give you an idea of what's happening, right? Some of the work that's happening with the GPT is also expanding into other domains. Yesterday, I think we were able to confirm that, or I guess this was back in August, that people are generating digital avatars for paralyzed people, right? Where they can now communicate for the first time with their spouse in a long time after having them paralyzed. The next big step for this is actually to just cut the cord for this young lady. So she's looking to actually have the implant, have the cords removed, and then they transmit all of that wirelessly, right? Think about how cool that could be for solving your problems while you lay in bed.
Colossal.
That's my dream, at least. When it comes to some of the other really big upcoming events, Bill Gates is really excited. When Bill Gates gets excited, it's something to be excited about.
Oh yeah,
you know,
for sure.
And a lot of what's actually happening too is we have enabled ourselves to learn better, right? And I think probably one of the more exciting stories that I heard during the process of researching some of the stuff was a story about, has anyone seen the Sal Khan talk on Khan Academy? It's a TED Talk on Khan Academy. Does anyone know what Khan Academy is?
Yeah.
Everyone's used it probably once or twice. Khan Academy, or Sal Khan, was stating during this talk that there was a young lady who reached out to him out of the blue, and he picks up the phone and she says, "I want to take the SAT." And the young lady says, "I'm not allowed to take it in my country, can you help?" Right? So the young lady had actually used Khan Academy videos to train herself on the basics of what was covered in the SAT, ultimately snuck out of the country, called Sal. Sal gets her to the SAT. She's now on the research team at Arizona State University, right? So the idea that the information exists for us to succeed is already there, right? We could literally self-learn to get to a point where we can go to college, right? At least it's proven in her story. Now, there's another step here that if you go to any private institutions, one of the numbers that they like to tout is ratio, right? They'll say there's a 10-to-1 ratio here at the school, or there's a 5-to-1, right? Your student is getting attention on a very small level, right? And when it comes to what we can do with AI, right? The idea is that it can actually become a teacher that knows you better than any other teacher probably would know you. It learns about your learning style. It knows what concepts you maybe have forgotten here and there. And the idea is that long term, this looks like a one-to-one tutor for every person in the world, right? And then ultimately, when you do that, I'll get a little mathy, that creates a 2 sigma standard deviation. And that means that good people, or bad students become good students become great, right? That's what's supposed to happen long term, right? If you have one-to-one tutoring. And so when we talk about productivity, which is where Microsoft is spending a bunch of its time, there's a bunch of really cool co-pilot scenarios that are coming about that I think will change the way that we work in a meaningful way, because it just knows so much about what you were doing. It knows I was creating an AI TED Talk today, and then in addition to that, it'll pull a spread